always remember my first experience this time when I landed in New York about 5 or 6 months ago. A seminar had been arranged on the theme, how do we participate in the emerging new consciousness? The organizers had some flyers printed and they were being distributed. One of them went to a food store and desired the flyer to be placed there in a prominent position. There was an elderly lady in charge. She had a look at this flyer and she said, "New consciousness? What's that? What's wrong with the old consciousness?" And I thought she had a point. Because we use the words without being very careful of their connotation. What's old consciousness? What's new consciousness? And what's the relevance of speaking of culture of consciousness? Well, the culture of consciousness has come into prominence because we are moving all the world over from an old, antiquated, outmoded age and the consciousness that functioned in that age towards a new set of values, a new way of thinking, new perspectives, deeper levels of feeling, new objectives of life energies, and even a new awareness in the physical body. These are the constituents of new consciousness that is slowly emerging in the world, leading it imperceptibly towards what is called a new age. And in this transition from the old to the new, which cannot be sudden, which cannot be precipitated, but gradual, not a revolution, but an evolution of consciousness. Education has a great role to play. If you look around, all the world over you will see that the old systems of education have broken down. Every country is experimenting with new ideas, new objectives, new processes. And we in India have been involved in this process for the last 10 years and more. And the place where I live, Sri Aurobindo Ashram, and the planetary city of Aurobindo, which has been in function for the last 10 years, 11 years, has been a center of certain new experiments in education based upon a new philosophy of education built around a spiritual experience of Sri Aurobindo and his radiant collaborator, the mother. Their basic philosophy, as far as education is concerned, is this: no child can be taught. All that we can do is to stimulate what is already there in the soul, in the inner being of a child. We start with child education. Second, a child has to be consulted in its growth. Third, you move from the near to the far. A child is not just an entity to be processed so as to fit into an existing pattern of society in whatever avocation, but it is a soul, it is an inner being which has come to this world for growth, for development of certain divine potentiality. And each one has its own stress of development. Proper education needs to consult what's the need of the child. And education has got to have more of an individual content than it is having at the moment. In fact, in this approach, education of a child should start even before the child is born. When the child is conceived, the mother of a child has to take special precautions, has to undergo her own system of education, which is to remove all sources of disharmony, agitations, tensions, and anxiety from her milieu, from her atmosphere. Because every single disturbing vibration goes into her system and in the long run affects the quality of the formation of the womb. She must take care to think noble thoughts, have great lofty ideas, place before herself pictures, photographs, representations of inspiring figures in history. If the would-be mother desires to have a noble, a heroic child, and this concentration daily upon these figures and an earnest prayer to the divine, to God, to bless that the soul of this time may be born in me. That does tell, and there are examples in history where number of mothers have succeeded in determining the nature and the character of the child by this kind of prenatal concentration and precautions. And when the child is born, it is taken as a trust from God. The first phase of bringing up the child necessarily goes through a physical stage, and that is where education proper starts. The education of which I am speaking to you tonight has 4 phases, 4 aspects. Physical education concerning the development of the physical body, awakening of the consciousness in the body, teaching the body to function on its own without depending upon directions or fearing interferences from the mind. Vital education, education of the life energies that stream through one, conservation of energies, the right expenditure of the sum of energies, the psychic education, which is the education of emotions, purification, inner purification, and the centering of the emotional being on the foundation of love, and mental education, which lies in training the mind to think on what wants to think and reject thoughts that one does not want to think. Silencing the mind, keeping it restful so that the right suggestions, the right impulses, when they come, they find a ready ground. And above all, a kind of spiritual education, not religious education, but an education aimed at being aware of the soul, of the divine presence in oneself. There is a center in each one of us, at the core of our being, which is luminous, which is eternal, which has an awareness beyond time and space. That is what we call the soul, the monad, the Atman, the self, in different traditions. But it is there to make it an important part of education, to become aware of this center of light, center of peace, center of harmony, and learn to articulate it in life, and eventually to organize all the life movements around this divine indweller in oneself. That's the acme of education of which I am speaking to you tonight. This scheme of education has 3 parties to it: the child concerned, the teacher, the parents. The parents have a greater responsibility in the upbringing of the child than the teachers in the school. Because after all, a child spends 5 to 6 hours in a school, but 18 hours it spends at home. And the real character of the child is formed at home, depending upon the influence, the example set by the parents at home. So it is rather the parents who have to educate themselves much more than the children. They have to learn to be exemplars of ways of conduct, ways of speaking, ways of functioning that will impress themselves on the growing consciousness of a child. We cannot continue the old habit of stuffing young minds with packets of information deciding what kind of career the child is going to have, as they do very much in certain parts of the world, particularly in the East. It is the aptitude, the tendencies, the affinities of the small children that have to be studied, channeled, guided, and made to find fruitful avenues of expression. We have in our place, it is a spiritual community of about 2,000 seekers from all parts of the world that has been functioning for over 50 years. And we have a center of education where there are 700 students, right from the age of 3 to the age of 21. And then we have found that small children, they are given a sense of freedom, but with an unseen supervision. They are given free scope to play and to learn as they play. Hereafter, we have recognized that education cannot be confined to classrooms. Education has to extend its connotation and become coextensive with life. Life itself is a school. And all that we can give in schools and colleges and universities, the education that we can give, is to prepare them to have the real education in life, sharpen the sense instruments, develop the rationalizing, the discriminating faculties of mind, to give the right responses to things. And this is processing of consciousness, developing consciousness. A child, a student is not an automaton, but it is an individual with a life of his own, a consciousness of his own, that has to be respected, that has to be regarded. It is easy to treat children as problem children. I always remember how some 3 or 4 years ago, a team of British educationists visited China on a fact-finding tour. And as they were being conducted in an institution, one of the British educationists turned round and asked his Chinese counterpart, "What do you do with your delinquents?" The Chinese friend didn't follow. He said, "What do you mean?" He said, those kind of dropouts, or those who don't study, those who do mischief, those who are problems in school, what do you do with them? They said, "Oh, you mean the brilliant ones." We hand them over to our best teachers because they are our future leaders. That reminded me immediately of an incident that had happened in our own place when the registrar and the principal of our school made a list of about 3 names and went to the head of our institution, the mother, she was a French lady, and told her that these 3 are problem children. There was 1 American boy and 2 Indian fellows. And she said they are problem children and they should be rusticated from the school, expelled from the school. She looked at the names and she shook her head. She was at that time 90 years old. She shook her head and he said, "I don't agree." He said, "But they don't study, they don't allow others to study, and they are a nuisance. And unless they are removed from the scene, we are not going to have peace. But the mother said, I don't agree. If you teachers have not been able to arouse interest in them, in the books, in the studies, it is your failure and not the failure of children. Then she said, to call these children problem children and shut them out is an escape. It is shirking of our responsibility. Because a number of children are being born on earth today in this period of transition in order to participate in the new age of new consciousness that is around the corner. And many of these children come with a special charge of consciousness which is related to the future. And they are finding it difficult to find adjustment with our existing patterns of living and functioning and the demands that you teachers make upon them in the traditional way. We have to study each problem individually, find out exactly where the friction arises and try to remedy that. Each problem child is a challenge and we must take it up. That opened my own eyes to many problems, individual problems that we come across in the world today. And a proper system of education has to proceed from this large vision, not just to put through children through a course, first primary school, then secondary school, then college and universities, then give a degree, and then leave him into the world. On a pattern of instruction which was devised decades ago, conditions have changed. Consciousness is changing, evolution is developing very fast. And mind you, the education that we have today is a severely mental education. It does not take account of the emotional side of man, of the life energy, life dynamism of man, of the physical body. Each one of these has a claim on the culture, on the development, on the growth of the total being. And education should be a process of attending to all these needs of the being simultaneously, comprehensively, recognizing that the mind is only an instrument. And there are other parts. The physical body also has a certain intelligence. The vital energies also have a self-propelling awareness. The emotions have a kind of mind, an emotional mind. And there is the reasoning mind, there is the mind of the intellect. Our psychology, as what is taught in the universities all the world over, is very, very superficial from the spiritual point and the yogic point of view. This psychology takes account only of the surface operations of the mind, and that belt of being of which the surface awareness is not conscious, they call it the unconscious. But things are not that simple. Ours is a very complex system. And every system of, any system of education to be worth the while has to base itself on a comprehensive psychology which takes into account not only the external mind, the surface mind with which we all function, but also of that level of being, tracts of consciousness behind the surface mind, not below, but behind what I would call the subliminal mind, where we are open to contact and impact from all around us, ideas of people, thoughts of others, whether they are articulated verbally or not, they make an impact, they influence, and when those things come up as thoughts, we think they are our own thoughts. 90% of our thoughts are not our own. They are absorbed and they are received from around us. There is the subliminal mind. Below the belt of the self-aware mind, there is the subconscious mind. Subconscious is where we are half conscious. We don't have the time or the willingness to explore what is there. We hide things from ourselves. This is the subconscious mind. Below the subconscious, there is the unconscious mind, of which we are not conscious at all. And the lowest levels of the unconscious mind is the inconscious, where consciousness seems to have been dead. Around us, physically, around our physical bodies, there is what is called the circumconscious mind, a mind which is related to the environment. Above the conscious mind, there is the superconscious, into which all parapsychology and the recent advances in psychology are probing slowly at the moment. All phenomena of telepathy, clairvoyance, psychometry, all these derive from that knowledge, from some movement in the subliminal and the superconscious reaches of our being. Educationists, those who have in their hands the task of educating the children and the young students, they have first to study this vast psychology, that yoga, that spirituality has thrown open to the Western mind. They have to experience it and learn that what we are doing at the moment is tinkering with the program. The whole man has to be tackled, not just processing of the surface mind. I was speaking of physical education. There is an untold potential in the physical body. We are blissfully unaware of it. Many of you may have heard of experiments that are going on in certain parts of California today to explore and plumb into the capacities of the physical body, the altered states of awareness that are possible to be experienced at the physical level. And they are doing number of experiments in jogging, running, miles and miles. After they meditate for a while, make suggestion to the body that you are the body, you have a will of your own, the mind is different, and after 15 minutes of concentrated meditation, they start running 10 miles, 15 miles, and they make a note at what stage the body started picking up speed, functioning on its own, how there was no fatigue at a certain level of consciousness, where one became free from the body involvement. All this experiment of releasing the potentialities in the physical body utilizing games, utilizing sports, not for amusement, but to bring out the hidden powers of the body, to learn proficiency and not just to win the game, to develop team spirit, to develop selflessness. It is for that the sports and sports activities are to be utilized and not to win cups. This side of physical education has yet to receive an adequate attention and recognition in most of the systems of education in the world. Second, life energies. Are we taught anywhere how to do the maximum with the minimum expenditure of energies? How much energy do we throw around from morning to evening? Is all that an expenditure of energy necessary? Do we ever analyze how much that we talk during the day is really necessary? Speech power in one of the ancient traditions of India, namely the Tantras, it has been explicitly stated, and it is a verifiable truth, that sex energy and speech energy have the same source in the human body. So when we speak unnecessarily, when we waste our speech energy, it is as good as wasting physical sex energy. This discipline of conservation of energy at different levels of our life, utilizing energies in the directions where they are required, gathering them, focusing them on the objectives that we have chosen, so that the energies acquire a direction of their own. When a purpose comes before them, the energies speed into action. Where the energies have to go slow, they slow down without a conscious interference by the mind. And there is the psychic education, which means each one has a sea of emotions, mixed, turbid. It is a sea, veritable sea. There are positive emotions, negative emotions, things that limit us, hold us to the narrow regions of ego, desire, selfishness, cruelty. There are untapped regions of deeper emotions, of emotions with a possible larger range, like benevolence, kindness, compassion, harmony, friendship, nobility, love. Now, every system of education worth the name, which wants to culture the consciousness, which wants to prepare young minds to participate in the new creation that is to come, has got to concern itself with this sifting of emotions, what they called in the old Greek terminology, catharsis, subjecting young minds visually, verbally, and in many other ways to processes of self-purification. So they tend to cherish and cultivate only the more positive and higher modes of emotional self-expression, till they find their anchor in love, in benevolence, in unity, and not in division. And there is the mind. Normally, even among adults, the mind is like an open market where thoughts cross and crisscross, come from all directions, and we have very little power. At any rate, we exercise very little control over our thinking processes. We learn by segmenting, we learn by fragmenting. forgetting the whole. We have to unlearn this habit of narrowing our minds, knowing that the province of knowledge is too vast for the limited logical mind to fathom. We have to expand the frontiers of our mind, open the windows. We have to teach students, youngsters, to accept that there are always many sides to a question. My teacher, Aurobindo, says in one of his aphorisms that the opposite of truth is not falsehood, but another truth. This is something that all of us have to bear in mind. When we are intolerant of other people's positions, of other ideologies than our own, every approach represents an aspect of truth. And truth is multiple. Creation is various. And this Catholicity of mind, an openness to accept suggestions and knowledge from all sides, and cultivating a capacity to see the reconciling elements and to recognize that when two positions, two ideas, two standpoints conflict, the resolution is to be found not at that level, but at a higher level. We have always to find the resolution at a higher level than the level where the contradictions arise. There have to be, at a higher grades of education, methods of silencing the mind, of focusing the mind, of keeping the mind quiet. They have to be developed and presented. I may mention that we have in our Center of Education a room of silence. Children, when they have questions which they can't answer, before the teacher gives the answer, they are advised to go to the room of silence and think of that problem. And very often they get the solution. When their own minds are quiet, they know what is the solution. I am told that nowadays in many industrial establishments, and I believe even in the United Nations, they have a chamber of silence where nobody talks. When people feel tense, when they have to take important decisions, they just go there and sit quietly, and they are helped. There is a presence, there is a providence, there is an overseeing consciousness which always regards our needs and helps the questing mind. And we have, it is proper part of this education to develop that awareness of the divine entity in each one. This is separate from religious education. Religious education has not been very productive. All over the world we have found it is counterproductive because in the existing state of institutionalized religions, each religion tends to be exclusive. The followers of one religion are encouraged directly or indirectly to look down upon followers of other religions. And this has caused untold harm. A spiritual education is quite different. It is psychological, and it only teaches one to recognize the facts of existence in oneself. One is not called upon to believe in a God somewhere in the sky or in a church or a temple, but there is an element here itself, in the heart of each person. They used to speak of the voice of conscience. Others speak of a mysterious presence. a presence of peace, of love. There is the chamber of the divine indweller in each one. And education must set the wheels moving towards that discovery of the divine inhabitant in each one. So that when people pass out of their educational institutions and face the battle of life, they are ready with the inner support, with the fully developed awareness in all parts of the being. I am told that such a system of education may be possible in certain selective institutions, but it is not possible where mass media are utilized and large numbers of students have to be processed. I do not know. I do not think that any problem is beyond the ingenuity of man, and we have to learn to devise ways and means of adopting some of these points in any new approaches to education. My teachers always believed that education through textbooks, copybooks, classroom lectures are slowly getting out of date. We have to press into service media like the film, like the TV, visual aids to carry the message to the developing consciousness of those who want to learn, who want to share in the growing explosion of knowledge that is taking place on earth today. These are some of the points that I wish to place before you. I know that the problems of education in your country are substantially different from those in mine, but by and large, humanity is one. And analyzed in their depth, all problems are the same. I would invite questions if you have any.
Particularly, we would agree with your holistic and spiritually oriented philosophy that found that they could not introduce it or could not sort of work with the system. There's a very well-known man, William Irving Thompson in New York, who have found it necessary to create institutions outside of the Orthodox Institute. I wonder if in your travels through the West you have found that there is a sign of any transformation of consciousness, any great transformation within existing institutions.
I do think so. Recently I participated in a seminar on child education in Wheaton near Chicago. The American Theosophical Society had organized a conference and a large number of teachers and education attended it, and we were 3 participants. One was a representative of what is called the Waldorf schools, following the system of Rudolf Steiner. Other one from New York was representing the Montessori system, and the third was myself, exposing the very methods of the philosophy of which I spoke now. And there, from their discussions and everything, it was very clear that quite a revolution of approach has taken place, and many educationists have realized the inadequacy of the old methods now. But they all complain of the lack of appreciation at the governmental level of these problems of educators. And those who wanted to find new experiments, they had to rely upon private funding. And They could not make much headway, but they found that up to certain levels in the administration, the bureaucracy, they could get a hearing which they could not get some years before. And vigorous discussions of the failures of our system and all that in journals, special books, publications, they have educated the public mind to a great extent. And I believe particularly in Germany, this movement towards new type of education has made great headway. And in countries like India, where the government is more understanding, more sympathetic, and it consists of those who have risen from the ranks, who have experienced these difficulties at the level of teachers or students. They are helping in what is called schemes of non-formal education, adult education, to break away from the traditional molds and recognizing the products of such types of education as eligible for recognition, for jobs or openings into universities and the like. So I do believe that there is some change that is slowly making itself felt. Though in most of the countries, the governments and the administration, they all tend to look at these problems purely from the financial angle. How much it is going to cost and from where we are going to find the money. But I personally believe, and as you will agree, that this has to be given top priority, because these types of whatever type of education we follow, that is going to determine who are going to be our administrators 40 years hence. And any sacrifice that the taxpayer is called upon to undergo is worth it. We have to pay willy-nilly to arms, expansion of arms, and so many other budgetary needs. But for health, for education, there is always a certain reluctance. Yeah.
You mentioned the emotional mind.
Yes.
Is there a way that we as individuals here, not in the school, can work on this area?
Yes. This is really a thing that is to be worked individually. And that is to have always periods of self-observation, self-contemplation, look back on events of the day, analyze what movements have been positive, what movements have been negative, and decide to excise from our life the minus movements and to exercise the willpower each day to act in terms of one's decisions. This requires sincerity to oneself, exercise of willpower, and not just giving in at the first obstruction or first obstacle. We all know very well what is right and what is wrong. We don't speak of sin or otherwise. From a spiritual point of view, there is no such thing as sin. There is only ignorance, no sin. Failure to understand what is what and doing things wrongly because we don't understand their role. So education has this role to dissipate the cobwebs of ignorance. And emotional purification, self-purification, what is required is a face-to-face frontal search into one's daily life and to eliminate movements that limit us, make us more selfish, more ego-centered, and less expansive. It is in each person's hands. And the success that the teacher has achieved in his or her personal life, that makes a big difference in the bringing up of the children under the care of the teacher. A disciplined teacher, a teacher with a certain emotional integration, is bound to have a great seen and unseen effect on the children in charge of the teacher. Yes, sir.
You spoke of the value of young children being with parents who have the ability to set an example. What perspective do you have on the age at which it's desirable, as it is, for the child to separate himself or herself from the parents to become educated in an institutional setting? We hear a lot about children of rich families that go to Switzerland to be educated. While it's fairly easy to poo-poo that, it seems to me like what I've heard about what they do in Switzerland is really incredible. What perspective do you have on that?
I do think that it is not wise till the age of 14, when the children reach a certain adulthood of mind, to separate them from the parents. Because the presence of parents means much more than just physical presence. There is an emotional closeness and a certain protective environment with the parents. Once they are placed in educational institutions of the type you mentioned, things get impersonalized. The personal factor, the personal approach dies. And they lose values of personal interchange, of personal affection, personal love, and they also become what I would call, in a certain sense, automatons, victims of a callous society. It has never paid to keep children in their young age in hostels and boardings. Where it is inevitable, it's another matter. But where there are parents, I think the parents should not absolve themselves or abdicate the responsibility to the children by just thrusting them here and there simply because they can afford it. They are denying the trust that Providence has placed in them in letting the child be born to us. I know in this country there is another complication, and that is the question of broken homes, which is not that acute in other parts of the world. What is to be done with a child in a broken home where the parents are separated, as they should do so often in this country? That's another question. I believe it is a question for sociologists. But I would rather that the child stays with the parent whom it loves. Yes. Yes, sir.
Does the educational system that they have in Aurobindo, does it have any particular stress, or is there much difference placed on the place of humor, divine humor?
Yeah. You see, there in Aurobindo, for instance, in that project of Universal Township, it is all an open-air education. We have no one building where all the children are herded together in different classes and somebody will go and lecture to them or talk to them with a board and all that. No. The children, they go to the homes of those from whom they like to learn. There may be artists, there may be musicians, there may be people who play well, there may be people who tell nice stories, there may be people who teach languages. Now in that free atmosphere they are allowed to pretty well do what they choose. And the children, they themselves go in groups and learn things wherever they might. And of course they are not left to themselves, unknown to them. There is a certain supervision. The mothers of those children, they hold group classes under the trees and in the fields, help the children also to participate in the manual work of the collectivity, like working in gardens, picking up fruits, things like that, as part of education, as part of working together with others. And everything that goes on in life, they are exposed to it. They see plays, dramas, they laugh, and they are more mirthful, cheerful, they are morose or serious. When we close down, the schools or whatever it is, whatever remains in the ashram for instance, during the vacation the children complain. They say, don't close down the schools, we feel very bored. And then we have to organize special programs for them. In the library or in picnics, a teacher to take batches of children. So there is a process of a self-education throughout. And they participate in all the aspects of life. So to go to school or to study is not a burden. They don't enjoy their vacations as we do here. They feel bored. There is no punishment, no examinations, no degrees and diplomas, but only a constant attention paid to the daily progress. If there is for each child to feel, I must know as much as the other child knows. There is no competition, but a spirit of emulation, not of rivalry. So we don't give prizes for the first person or the second person. We do the grades. And there is a free progress system where children are told to choose whatever subject they like. And in that they are helped to specialize, though a basic education is given in all other subjects. Some children, they become so mature that they say, this system won't fit me. Please put me in the regular classes. I don't want to decide for myself. So these children are treated as adults. Today's children refuse to be treated as children. They respond to trust, to appreciation and to a certain regard given by parents and the teachers. And if you look around, today's children know much more and they have greater capacities of absorption than we had in our childhood days. Look at their eyes, how awake, alert and conscious they are. Of many children, what say during the last 1 decade. They are meant to do something greater than what we could have done. Yes.
From the standpoint of the student, if education for life, which he expects from society, or if education of privilege, which he must continually earn.
From the point of view of the student, it must be a privilege. From the point of view of the society, it must be a right.
You mentioned how we continually squander our energy
Yes.
when we communicate. Now, isn't some level of like social communication, like, even if it's just saying hello or how you doing, isn't that also important?
It is, but it has to be a fruitful communication. Fruitful communication. Now, all the energies that we spend, for instance, in what is called gossiping, idle talk, well, that helps nobody. It doesn't elevate our consciousness. It doesn't enlarge our minds. And then, for instance, the energy that you spend in TV, in the seminar of which I spoke, one of the authorities in the subject, he explained how 2 hours of watching TV drains away as much energy from us as 8 hours of movie. We are so much absorbed, and it is drawing out so much of energy from us. This that you spend away in 2 hours what we normally take 8 hours in a cinema house. Now these are many of the leaks of our energy, and our children are constantly exposed to TV. I have noted in many American homes where I have lived for a day or two during my tours, the children sit with their plates near the TV and they eat mechanically with one hand and they always watch. Now that food is not going to nourish those chip bodies. These are some of the things where we have to conserve our energies. How, I do not know, but it is a fact. Technology, as it has developed, has done great service to humanity by freeing man from the drudgery of labor, by giving time to devote for the cultivation of higher pursuits, higher values. But do we utilize it for that purpose? So many gadgets. You friends who live in this country have no idea of the blessings of technology that we have. We don't have washing and drying machines. We don't have these kind of electric ovens. We don't have this kind of refrigerators. We don't have so many cars. These are all the privileges of the rich in our part of the globe. They have to spend the whole day, women in our country have to spend morning to evening only in these drudgeries. Here your women are free to think, to plan, and I am satisfied that the bulk of them are making the better use of their time, right use. So you have greater prospects for evolving new methods of education and culturing of consciousness than other people have.